Three sisters take on the bank that's above the law, and the journalist on the front lines of Australia's war on free speech. Coming up on today's Citizens Report. Welcome to the Citizens Report for the 24th of October 2024. I'm Elisa Barwick. Joining me today is Citizens Party Research Director Robbie Barwick. Welcome.
Thanks, Lisa.
And on today's show, we're going to be talking about ANZ Bank breaching the law and how Treasurer Chalmers must hold them to account.
But he hasn't and he won't, and for that reason the town has lost its bank branch, and the town is famous for three sisters who took the fight up to the government.
Yes. And then we're going to go through an article written by legendary journalist Mehreen and her personal battle, and that a battle to uphold that of the integrity of journalism in Australia, to allow truth to permeate our media, be it the legacy media or social media, and of course the implications for the misinformation and disinformation bill, as we've been talking and discussing on the show regularly.
Yeah, journalists who have experience in mainstream media, who have come out and blown the whistle in a sense on how the narrative is so controlled, they're the best insight into what they want to achieve with social media through this bill. Right? They want to bring it back to the narrative can be completely controlled, and we'll go through the details.
Now, do hit the like button, comment below, circulate this on social media as much as you can, and please donate if you can. There's a link you can find below as well. And of course, all the backup information you can find in our Australian Alert Service magazine, which you can also subscribe to or contact us to get a complimentary initial copy to check it out. Before we get into the show, just a reminder on our mobilisation, which is ongoing on the misinformation and disinformation, or the MAD law bills.
Yeah, so you'll see it when we cover the Mehreen story that why this is so important, but we've been right on it for quite a while now. Last Thursday, while we were shooting the last episode of the show, there was the second hearing that the government scheduled into the bill, and the government's rushed these hearings. The witnesses are given barely any notice, and they've made sure there's no public. These are in the big hearing rooms in Parliament. If there was enough notice, like a week or so, these would be packed, right? People hate this law, and they would express it in those hearings. But so they've stage managed this so it doesn't happen. Anyway, the hearings have, every time I see them, they've reconfirmed that the biggest challenge we have in stopping this bill is the Greens, because on the one hand, because the government can't pass it without them. The Libs have done a runner. They initiated this. They're not dumb though. They want to get re-elected. They've seen the public backlash. They've done a runner. They're washing their hands of the bill. And now they've done that, and they don't have to come up with stupid arguments to justify the bill. They're out there arguing free speech, and it's the clearest arguments you've ever heard Liberal elected politicians say, right? Absolutely clear. No, it's about free speech. And that's what it's about. It's the people who are trying to justify this bill are coming up with all these convoluted arguments, twisting themselves in knots, right? Because it is about free speech and they're pretending it's about something else. So it's only the Greens that can pass this, and that comes down to Sarah Hanson-Young, and she's participating in the hearings. And I'm watching her line of questioning very closely. And the problem is her bias is towards passing the bill, and if anything, expanding the scope of the bill to include mainstream media. So she thinks that would be fairer. And on paper, yes, that would be, if all our free speech is impinged upon, instead of one section being excluded, of course that would be fairer, but would that be right? It's the wrong bias, right? The bias should be towards stopping this bill. And so that's why the public needs to keep calling the Greens. We have to stay on them until something shifts. You've got to keep saying to them, why are you doing this? Don't you realise that this will also be used against you? This is not about her. The other thing that she has convinced herself of is that this is about reining in the power of the big tech companies. Yes, the big tech companies have power, but this particular issue is not about reining them in. So wait till the end of the show when we talk about the Mehreen story. You'll get a clearer sense of that. Rein them in other ways, right? But in fact, this will, as we've discussed before, this actual bill will consolidate their power because it imposes so many onerous regulations on the tech companies who run the social media platforms. Only the big rich ones will be able to comply with it. And no new ones will start up to compete with them, right? So you'll end up having concentrated social media, censored, like we have concentrated mainstream media, censored, and that's what they want, right? We have concentrated mainstream media because over the decades, governments, we used to have these laws called cross-media ownership laws, where the governments restricted how many media outlets any particular media baron could control to ensure there was a diversity of voices in the media, right? They got rid of those and now it's totally concentrated. There's about 3 players in this. It's the tightest controlled media in the world. They want social media to be the same thing. The Greens should not fall for this, right? They themselves always get accused by the Labor Party of being deliberate peddlers of misinformation that is harmful. Therefore, it will be used against them. You, though, have to stay on them. We have to keep on to the Greens until they actually get the message from the public they better not support this.
Yep, so pick up the phone, get on your keyboard and do that straight after the show. On to the first topic. 3 sisters take on the bank that's above the law. So last week on the show we reported the case of Murwillumbah in New South Wales, that the ANZ Bank backed down on its planned closure there, which is really good news. But the other bank that was slated for closure yesterday was in Katoomba in the Blue Mountains, also in New South Wales. Now this,
which is the where you go if you want to visit the famous 3 sisters.
Yes, the rock formation, and we had protests this week because one of the things we wanted to draw attention to was the fact that ANZ, when it was given the green light to do its takeover of Suncorp, there was a condition put on that takeover by the Treasurer Jim Chalmers. And that was no closures of any ANZ or Suncorp branches in regional areas. But, as you can see, they have just closed the Katoomba branch. They backed down on the Murwillumbah one, but Katoomba, and we'll talk a little bit more in a moment about regional or not regional, because of course, as usual, they pull a shifty when it comes to these kinds of considerations. But we organised with other parties that have been fighting.
We were motivated to do something this week because the locals in Katoomba are at the end of their tether, and Kim Grace, one of the locals who you're going to see on a clip we're about to play, he put out an email to a lot of politicians and people who had been involved in this, monitoring this, saying, look, we're at the end of our tether, nothing we've done has worked, no one has listened to us, no one cares. So, and the independent journalist Dale Webster, who we've worked with for a number of years now, who's exhaustively documented the scale of this problem around Australia, such that we've had the big Senate inquiry, we've got a lot of attention on it, and we've forced the banks in different ways to back down. She also expressed in an email, look, that this is just so outrageous because, like, Katoomba is not more special than any other place that has lost a bank branch. Yeah. It's just the way this closure is so blatantly in defiance of the law, and the ANZ's being allowed to get, ANZ and Shane Elliott, the CEO, are being allowed to get away with it. Right? Yeah. This is what she found really grating. So we thought, okay, what can we do? And because we're the Citizens Party and we've got some good people out there, we're able to pull together 3 protests in a day in 2 states, one in Katoomba, which you'll see, and 2 in Brisbane actually. And the reason they were in Brisbane is because the Treasurer's office is there. We had one at the Treasurer's office and we had one at it just happened, it was going to be one in Brisbane, but then on the same day, it just happened, the Suncorp AGM was being held. And this is about the ANZ's, this condition was put on ANZ because of its merger with Suncorp, right? And so we can show people what we did.
Yeah, so among the trio of protests, we had the 3 sisters leave Katoomba and show up at both at the Suncorp AGM and at the Treasurer's office.
Now, because if you look at the actual Three Sisters rock formation, on their way to Queensland, their hair got a bit bleached, so they got lovely
Golden hair.
Is that golden colour? Is it?
Sunny
so
Brisbane.
blonde. Anyway, so they made quite an impression. You can see the Three Sisters there.
Yeah, and what we're going to do now is run a clip from the project because in the flurry of activity and calling around to media and so forth, the project picked up on this and ran a quite significant segment on it. So we'll run that clip.
Now, in the heart of the Blue Mountains, a small town is waging war with a major bank. Their last brick and mortar branch set to shut. It's a scene that's playing out right across the country.
In the historic town of Katoomba in New South Wales, locals are angry.
ANZ, breaks the rules! ANZ, breaks the rules!
But their protests have been in vain. ANZ Bank set to shut down its only branch in town tomorrow.
Really disappointed, and I'm not the only one.
A lot of people have been angry about what's happened.
I need to have a face-to-face service.
When a branch closes in a regional area, we see enormous impact, especially elderly people. It puts them at enormous risk of scams. We also see big impact on small and medium businesses.
Katoomba customers have accused the bank of breaking a promise. In June, the Federal Treasurer approved ANZ's $4.9 billion takeover of Suncorp Bank. But the deal came with a condition.
We agreed with the Federal Treasurer that we will not close any regional branches for a period of 3 years.
ANZ says it stayed true to its word, claiming that although Katoomba is in the heart of the Blue Mountains, a 1.5-hour drive from Sydney and eligible for regional working visas, it's technically not regional. And the Katoomba is classified by the Australian Bureau of Statistics as a major city location.
The ANZ Bank don't know what they're talking about.
I think that's a very, very far stretch of imagination.
For ANZ customers in Katoomba, their nearest branch now nearly 50 kilometres away.
The travel to go to another NZ Bank is just way too far from here.
While the rate of regional and remote bank closures across the country is slowing, between 2017 and 2024, 847 have shut up shop.
More and more people aren't using branches of any description because they don't need to and they don't actually want to.
ANZ pointing out that transactions at their branches have halved, just 1% now done over the counter.
Banks have forced us to do that by closing bank branches, by removing staff in contact centres that have blown out the wait times. Banks have really left us no option but to do our banking online.
So as the lights go off inside another brick and mortar bank, are regional communities being dudded?
We are all forced to deal with the banking sector, and for us that means that the banking sector needs to meet our needs, not the other way around.
Well, local Kim Grace has banked with ANZ for more than 4 decades and has been leading the charge to save his brick and mortar branch. Kim, you've managed to get more than 15,000 signatures on an online petition. What do you think the bank means to the community?
It's, what the bank means to the community. It's more the other way, actually, what the community means to the bank. That's the big question, isn't it? You know, I mean, the ANZ Bank is basically just showing complete disregard and disrespect for the Blue Mountains community. We've got 80,000 people living through the Blue Mountains, and they were the only ANZ branch in a stretch of country, 120 kilometres wide. So, that's the question you've got to ask.
So what do you say to this argument that Katoomba is a major city location because that's how the Australian Bureau of Statistics classifies it?
Mate, have a look behind me. A major city, a major bloody city, come on. Like, yeah, I've got to drive, I'm in Mount Victoria, which is the highest part of the Blue Mountains. I've got to drive 25 kilometres to this branch, which is now closed. The nearest branch I've now got is Bathurst, which is just over an hour to the west. Or I've got to drive right across the Blue Mountains to the Riff or Penrith, taking my life in my hands going down there. I don't like the flat land in the first place. But, you know, like, that's a bloody hour and a bit. Central is over 2 hours on a train. Come on. The Suncorp deal included a proviso from the Treasurer, what's his name, Jim Charming, I call him, Jim Chalmers, by the way, who could actually stop the closure tomorrow if he wanted to. part of that takeover was that they wouldn't close regional branches, any regional branch, for 3 years. And so what they've done is they've massaged the truth, the ANZ branch or the bank, and said, no, it's not regional. And I don't give a toss what the Department of Statistics says or whatever. Everyone knows this is regional, mate.
Hello to all our viewers in Penrith, by the way.
Hopefully Jim Chalmers has now heard your plight about going to Penrith and he shuts this whole thing down.
No, mate, I love the riff. I just use a bulletproof vest when I go down.
Yeah, right. There's a good El Jana in Penrith. It's a great place. Great place. Now, Kim, the banks are saying transactions are down. So can you understand that they kind of have to respond to changing behaviour?
What about all the people who are disabled? What about the elderly people? People can't afford the internet. People can't afford a laptop. Older people don't even know how to use them. I mean, I'm 68 and I'm struggling. I struggle to use my bloody phone. That's a load of rubbish. We still need face-to-face representatives of the bank. It costs them probably 10 minutes of the CEO's wages to keep this place open for the year, for 4 hours a day. What happened to loyalty? And what happened to the great Australian tradition of looking after your mates and standing by people in a crisis? We've got a cost of living crisis here, and they're bailing like rats from a sinking ship. That's what it feels like.
Kim, I understand that at least for the moment there are other banks with branches there. What do you reckon you'll do? Are you prepared, or will you take your money out of ANZ and go to another bank?
Bloody oath I will, mate. You've got to be kidding me. And I can tell you now, 15,247 people that signed the petition, a lot of them have said the same to me. So they'll go to, I don't know, the Bendigo Bank or one of those people. I know they're owned by one of the big four as well, but at least they stick around.
Bendigo Bank, regional bank. Who'd have thought? Kim, we'll see what transpires on that. Thank you very much for your time. It's been good to speak.
No, thanks for the project, and you're the best-looking crew on television.
Oh, yes.
Hey, holy!
Can we get him back? Where did he go?
He got my headshot, so I sent him in the mail.
Oh, clearly. Well, for ANZ's full statement, please head to our website.
And that's Kim Grace, everybody.
He did a great job.
He's a natural, actually. And this is a guy who worked so hard to try and save his bank branch. So he had a great time that day, finally getting some attention. But of course, it's ultimately not worked, because today's Thursday. Yesterday, the branch closed permanently, but it actually closed early. Get this, because when ANZ got wind there was going to be a protest outside, as you can see, it was not a threatening protest. Nevertheless, the police got involved. They heard about it and they contacted the organisers, Kingsley Lou, who you saw there on the clip. The police assured themselves it was okay. But then ANZ used the protest, which was scheduled for 3 o'clock, as an excuse to close the branch early for security reasons, because they feared the protest would incite people to be unhappy at the bank.
No.
I mean, this is as if ANZ management really cares about the staff, who would be the brunt of that unhappiness. They've just sacked them. Right? They just destroyed their jobs. And you saw the finance sector union person speaking to the way they've done that. Now, I'll take one exception to the way the project presented that as well. They then just repeated ANZ's claim that the number of in-store transactions has collapsed. It's absolute, utter rubbish. They use these statistics that show face-to-face banking transactions as a percentage of total transactions. In this digital era, all total transactions have soared. All total engagements with the banks have soared. I use a bank app. I could look at my balance 5 times a day. That's an interaction with the bank, right? If you didn't have, back in the old days, you went to the bank once a week or something like that, more if you had to. You didn't do those kinds of things. That's all counted. The actual usage of these branches have not fallen. That's why when we had 13 hearings around Australia about it, last year and this year, the public turned up in force and expressed their real anger because of what these banks have just abandoned them and withdrawn these services. So that was a lie. But what do you expect? Because we're going to show you the guy's a liar.
Yeah, well, we can look at that clip now. So this is a Senate hearing where MP Daniel Molino asked Shane Elliott about this because he heard wind of the closures, these two closures at Murwillumbah and Katoomba.
So this, you'll see that this is a clip that the clip in the project story was taken from, but we want you to show you the longer clip and pay attention at the end, the very end, to what Shane Elliott says before he's corrected by his offsider.
So firstly, I think when we talked earlier about regional and rural bank closures, so can you just remind me what the current position is?
Sure. So we agreed with the Federal Treasurer that we will not close any regional branches, either Suncorp or ANZ, for a period of 3 years from the date of acquisition, which was, a month ago.
Okay. No, just that I've had some feedback that there's active discussion going on in I think Katoomba and Murwillumbah around this, and that there's actually kind of petitions and discussions in the community and pushback on some scheduled closures for October.
They were ones that were already in train before the condition was even discussed with us. So, as you can imagine, outside of the current moratorium, there's quite a long consultation period, and we give communities a reasonable amount of notice to say this is what we're going to do. When we talk to people about what alternatives will be put in place. Some of those had already started. The negotiations and when the Federal Treasury put in place the requirements, they were literally not at the last, they were right towards the end of our negotiations. And so when we kicked off those branch closure, we weren't aware of that we were going to make that obligation, and that's why they sort of caught in the middle. And so we're re-looking at those.
So you're re-looking at them?
So,
yes.
So specifically, actually, with Katoomba, we are planning to go through with that closure.
Now, see, Elisa, this is the thing. So they mentioned two branches, Murwillumbah, ANZ backed down on, because, and it was he said there Murwillumbah was also in train.
Yeah.
So he said we're looking at both those again, or we're considering them again. And then he got contradicted by the person who knew, well, we better not mislead a Senate inquiry, because he just did. He just lied and said, oh, we're looking at them again. No, he had no intention of looking at them again in Katoomba. What they did is they came up with this way to, as you saw, count it as major city instead of inner regional, right? Even though, by the way, the biggest mountain range in Australia is between Katoomba and an actual major city. But Elisa, the real issue here is people should get angry at Shane Elliott. He's the longest serving CEO of banks, Big Four bank CEO in Australia. He has gutted ANZ's public customer service, absolutely gutted it. He's what he did, he went around and shut half the branches of ANZ, and then he said, oh, we're not really a big bank, we're a small bank when it comes to these sorts of things, right? We're not much bigger than Bendigo. Yeah, because you cut half the branches, right? So another condition, by the way, of the ANZ takeover of Suncorp is that ANZ must, in good faith, negotiate with Australia Post to finally join Bank at Post, pay the money to join Bank at Post. ANZ is not negotiating in good faith. It keeps insisting to Australia Post, we're not big like Commonwealth Bank, we shouldn't have to pay the same amount of money. The same amount of money is Christine Holgate, what she asked for was $20 million a year out of their $6 billion profit, $20 million, to be represented at Bank at Post. Because the worst thing about ANZ closures compared to other branches is every other bank, and this is not good, but every other bank when it closes, you can at least access your account at that bank at the local post office. If you're an ANZ customer, you cannot, right? So that's why this was a condition. He's not negotiating good faith on that. But the people who are putting these conditions on are the issue, Elisa. And in this case, this is Jim Chalmers. He put the condition on.
Enforcer.
Shane Elliott was crystal clear what it was. He expressed it crystal clear in that clip, right? Crystal clear. It's up to the Treasurer to enforce it. And his enforcement is, that was a condition for approving the takeover. Okay, revoke your approval until you bring these bastards into line. And because they won't do that, That's why we need a public bank.
Yeah. What are you going to do about it, Jim? And look, if he doesn't do anything about it, that's just going to give us more grist for the mill to ramp this campaign up even further. Because I'll just mention before we go into our solution here and the only way to really intervene on this, that news.com.au had coverage today. Customers left fuming over Big Four banks' branch closures. So the heat is maintaining on this issue. They reported on the Katoomba outrage. They literally said bank branches are also becoming a thing of the past, with Aussies losing access to 230 banks in the last financial year and a total of 2,334 in the past 7 years. Combined, they said the number of bank branches and bank-owned ATMs has halved in 7 years, from 19,500 to 8,800, meaning Australia's banks have dismantled half of their cash distribution network. And a 16th October news.com.au article said that more than half of Australia's ATMs and 1/3 of bank branches have closed since 2019, reporting on figures from CanStar. So, you know, this is the bigger picture here. The Australian government has acknowledged that it has put on the agenda, on its to-do list, a postal bank to rectify this problem. But nothing more has been said about that.
We don't know the details yet.
We don't know the details of that, so we're putting out a media release today to tell them exactly what needs to be in the specifications of that agenda item. So, first of all, service has to be the priority, and we'll put the link to this release below. You should print this out, circulate it.
This is going for most people dealing with this bank. This has to be the defining feature. That this is a bank committed to face-to-face customer service.
Yes.
Right? And it will never change. It will always be there for face-to-face customer service. So it sets a standard for service that the Big Four will be forced to compete with.
Yeah.
You will see the Big Four start reopening branches once they see how many customers they start losing to the government bank.
As the project, you know, kind of discussed there, will you leave your bank? And lots of people will, especially if there's a local post office bank that is government guaranteed and it is not liable to disruption. Secondly, it should be a full service bank, which the post office is capable of delivering.
Yeah, so right now, banking at the post office is not full service. All you can do is access your account, right? We need, so you can put money in and take money out. We need full service. So deposits, for sure, secure deposits, which, by the way, because the bank will be owned by the government, will be fully guaranteed, not this 250,000 limit, which the government doesn't even back up. Like the financial claims scheme, that is your guarantee in the bank, has a limit of 250,000, but it's only enacted after a bank collapses, and that's if the treasurer deems it should be. There's still he has the discretion not to. But if you've lent to the government, if you put your money in the government bank, that means you've lent to the government, right? It has the liability to you, and that's why it'll be fully guaranteed. But it has to do lending as well, right? And lending to, we can give some more details, but think of it this way. The main business of banking is based around the spread between the interest rates that banks pay on their deposits and the interest rates they charge on their loans. And the banks like that to be as big as possible, right? It's roughly around 2%. And that 2% adds up to enormous profits. Plus, they do a lot of other gambling and stuff. But that's the nub of the business. A government bank isn't there. It's there. It needs to make a profit to be, self-funding. That's all. It doesn't need to maximise its profit.
It doesn't need to gouge.
So it can give its depositors a higher interest rate and charge its borrowers a lower interest rate and on more beneficial terms to make sure those loans help the borrowers. And the borrowers should be, individuals, like personal loans and loans to community organisations, loans to local industries, loans to small businesses. These, especially in the regions, these are the sectors that the banks just deny credit to. It should do home loan lending, but only in areas that it can actually make a difference, such as to first home buyers on really beneficial terms to help them get into the market, right? also there's outside of the major cities and especially in the more remote areas, banks are hardly even lending to anyone there even for home loans. So this bank could be making those kinds of loans, right? That sort of thing. And doing it in this beneficial way, that means this is a bank that serves people.
Yeah, so that's part of point 4 of targeted lending, and that's just to mention point 3, support the postal network. That's a crucial.
100%. We've got 2 services that are right now at risk of being lost: face-to-face banking services and post offices. The latest post office that I've been notified is closing is in Mehreen in Melbourne, Mehreen Central, which is a very busy post office, and Australia Post is just doing its normal thing, saying, nah, making excuses. They claim it's not being used enough. It's absolute rubbish. Locals have informed me of this. Shout out to Amy for doing that. So that's at risk, and bank to bank, face-to-face banking is at risk. Whereas this will save both. But the government has to actually see that it has to be structured in such a way to make sure that the post offices share in the revenue to keep them financially viable. That's incredibly crucial.
And then finally, we've added a factor here which is a transformative one, and as has been seen in other countries, the postal banking network can channel funding into a broader national development infrastructure bank that can utilise government credit to transform the economy, and particularly in Australia's case, housing, gas, electricity, roads, rail. These are the big ticket items that transform the conditions in which small businesses and families are operating.
The first ever post office bank was the British Post Office Bank, started in like the 1860s, and it nearly killed William Gladstone, the Prime Minister, to start it because he had to take on the City of London. And he said the lesson of that was, in terms of the message he got, is the City of London was to remain supreme and unquestioned. But he ran through this post office bank, and for the first time allowed poor British people to actually have savings. They were able to put their money in the bank, but it didn't lend back to them. It lent to the government, and it started funding the government's infrastructure projects. The Japanese copied it a decade later, and Japan Post, that was in the 1870s. Now Japan Post Bank is one of the biggest banks in the world, and it's the main funder of Japanese government infrastructure. We could have a bank that actually does both, right? And what do we mean by housing? Everyone knows we need public housing, and Albo's got $10 billion on the table or whatever, and Dutton has just put up government money to the tune of $5 billion to help build the infrastructure. This is all penny ante stuff, right? You could fund it big time with, okay, here's a source of credit. If it's paying, say, 3.5% deposit rate, there's a nice deposit rate. That's still a really brilliant borrowing rate for the government, right? Put another percent on there for 3.6% or whatever to make sure the bank's administration costs are covered, and you've got long-term funding, reliable funding for the government to build public housing. Build the gas shortages, because we don't have a gas shortage, we export the most gas in the world, but we need a pipeline from where it is in the northwest down to the eastern states, so the gas cartel can't extort us. It could build that pipeline. The Whitlam government was talking about this, back in the 70s, this kind of infrastructure. Electricity, get the electricity back under state control, build new state-owned electricity. We had the best electricity in the system right up until the 90s when we privatised it all, and it was all state-owned, and it was all built with this kind of long-term lending. Roads and rail, the same thing. We could build the best, high-speed rail system in Australia. This is what the Australian people could do.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even need to take deposits. The postal bank could actually be an agent for the super funds to buy bonds that are specially for this kind of investment, and the postal bank has a development section that becomes the agent for that. The sky is the limit on what you could. This is why we did it. We could do it again. That's why we've put this in there.
And I say it's transformative to everything, because just take one example, high-speed rail, and the impact it could have on the housing problem. People wouldn't mind living far out of the cities. They would love it, actually, if they didn't have to drive 2 hours to work, but they could get on a high-speed train for 20 minutes, say, right? So it completely transforms everything. However, bringing us to our next topic on the subject of transport, not only is it the banks that are getting away with breaching the laws of this country, as in the case of ANZ, so too is it the big and mega corporations, particularly those that run transport. And on Monday night, Four Corners did a show called Road Gold about the private toll road operators and the absolute racket that they're a part of. And, you know, I encourage people to watch it for the details.
But before you go through those details, just to segue from what we were saying, this system of toll roads began at the same time we privatised the Commonwealth Bank. So what governments did is they developed this ideology. Instead of actually funding infrastructure in the way I've just laid out, they said, oh no, we'll get the private sector to fund it. And they had to give them such conditions to do that. They've indentured the Australian public to these projects, and we are being ripped off completely because governments didn't want to stick with the system of funding infrastructure, that public infrastructure with public credit that worked.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I'll just mention 3 examples in three cities. Brisbane, I mean, this is how bad it gets in terms of, because cities are now overridden with toll roads there. Yeah. It's very hard to avoid them, and a lot of people are getting caught because they're travelling on them and accruing fines that they just can't pay because they're so expensive and you have to travel on them so often. So, for instance, Ipswich residents, the Four Corners show said, travelling from Ipswich to the city or to the airport on toll roads during the week, this ends up costing them about 12% of the average annual income for that region. This is insane for something that should be free.
This doesn't show up in their taxes, Elisa, but it's a private tax on their existence. A private tax.
Yeah.
Everyone rails against the taxes we pay the government. The loudest anti-tax voices were behind this scam.
Yep.
They demonise the taxes you pay the government so they could set up systems to make sure you get gouged in literally private taxes to private corporate interests.
Now, in Victoria, it's rather extraordinary because the massive fines that are being levelled are resulting in arrests and even prison time. I mean, there was a roofer that they had on there. He owes $185,000. Like, there's no way he's going to be able to pay that. And in 2022-23, in 1 year, $46 million worth of fines were issued. And this is since the Victorian government made a change that only allows these private companies to fine you once a week. That happened in 2020. Before that, you could be fined multiple times in the course of a week, like several, 10, a dozen times. Fines halved after that took place. But prior to that...
And in the case of Victoria with CityLink, which was the first big toll road in Australia, the fines are actually collected by the government.
Yeah.
This is the government serving a private corporation to enforce its private fines on the public.
Exactly.
That is fascism. That is corporativism. This is what Mussolini invented in the 1920s in Italy. We have it here in Victoria in this system.
Yeah, he was the first to utilise private toll roads with those kind of fees. And this lawyer that was quoted on the show, Shifra Bluestein, said, I think people are entitled to feel a level of outrage that the taxpayer is absorbing the costs of a system that is designed to protect a private company's profits.
Right on.
A merger of the state with corporate power was how Mussolini defined fascism, essentially. Now, in the case of Sydney, the other example, Premier Chris Minns' government commissioned Professor Alan Fels, formerly the head of the ACCC, and economist David Cousins to conduct a review of Sydney's toll road network as part of its 2023 election campaign promise to slash prices on the network. But the final report, which was released in July, which called for prices to be controlled, by the way, by a state government agency, was partially suppressed. Fels has spoken to the media about this, and he was indeed quoted on Four Corners, because he said that part of what was suppressed was the financial modelling that reveals the fat revenues and profits guaranteed by governments. He said, we wanted to publish a lot more information, but we were blocked strongly by the 3 deputy secretaries involved, and at the last minute they produced an overnight legal opinion from a firm they use. The main threat was I'd be sued for billions of dollars and possibly face criminal sanctions. And according to the New South Wales Transport Department, who was asked about this, they said that it was because it involved commercially sensitive information. And I'll add to that the New South Wales government had also promised to reveal the secret contracts that are granting these private companies, these lucrative capabilities to literally print money, as Macquarie Bank once described it. But the New South Wales government has not yet delivered on that pledge, I will add. So Macquarie Bank is one of these global, along with Transurban and others, but Macquarie Bank...
Well, Macquarie Bank actually started these roads, since they've sold some of them to Transurban. Macquarie Bank was the big initiator of private toll roads in Australia.
Yeah. So, Robbie, tell the story about how Macquarie admitted this is a licence to print money.
Yeah. 2003, Macquarie Bank had expanded to the UK, where it was also starting up toll roads in the UK. And one of their executives, his name was Dennis Eager, he was briefing investors on what a great opportunity this was. And in his briefing to investors, he said, we can put up the tolls by whatever we like, and we can start the tolls on day one by whatever we like. If motorists don't complain about it being too high, then we won't have done our job. So he was boasting. What he didn't know, there was a journalist in the room, and the journalist reported that. Macquarie Bank fired him. It didn't fire him for anything other than getting caught. That's why Macquarie Bank fired. He just was honest about what their business model was. And this is what our governments signed us up to with these deals. And now they've got worse and worse every year. And now it's crushing, especially places like Sydney and Brisbane and the people who have to use CityLink in Melbourne. And of course, that part was always predictable. How short-sighted was this? I'll give you some stats on CityLink in Melbourne. When it was finished being built, because we were here then, we remember everyone started to use it. I think the final construction cost was about $3.4 billion that the private consortium spent building it. An analysis was done that said if the government had have just borrowed to build it itself, it would have cost $1.6 billion. And if the government had have just paid that $1.6 billion out of normal revenue, it would have been paid off in 20 years or so, right? And the whole asset would have been owned. Instead, the concession, it's called, given to the consortium was for the consortium to harvest tolls, guaranteed tolls for 50 years. And when I say guaranteed, I mean guaranteed. When COVID lockdowns were implemented, the private toll companies squealed the loudest because their extortionate skimming of the Australian public wasn't working anymore because no one was using the toll road. We were all locked down, especially in Melbourne. And so the government bailed them out for that. Even though they've got this 50-year thing where they've just raked it in. And it's so lucrative that Ellen Fells was not allowed to release that part of the information.
Yeah, and look, this is part of the laissez-faire, free-for-all, neoliberal market economy that we've created, and which the two parties are both bending over backwards to protect because it's part of the neoliberal economic consensus of the uni party. And what we're about to go through in our next segment is that this is going to get dramatically worse if freedom of speech to talk about such things and more suppression such as that.
If they can shut down our discussion on YouTube about this, I'd love to.
And what happened with Ellen Fell's report, etc., with the misinformation, disinformation laws, that's going to get dramatically worse. So on to our next topic. The journalist on the front lines of Australia's war on free speech. Now, I'll just say, there's a great video on Martin North's channel, Walk the World, which you can look at for an assessment and a review of the hearing that occurred two Fridays ago now. And there's another hearing that happened since then, which he'll no doubt review as well. But what happened in the debate about these laws, as you alluded to earlier, is basically the Senate inquiry descended into chaos in complete disagreement. even people from the same organisation who had two different spokespeople there couldn't agree. The chair of the Senate was intervening, or the chair of the inquiry was intervening to try to shut down the debate, even in the course of those proceedings. There was just such a big issue over the fears of blanket censorship, the bias of fact checkers, the enabling of severe penalties for individuals, the potential for foreign interference. There's so much more to be discussed over this, but what we're saying is, look, if in doubt, throw it out. That's what you can tell the Greens. But Mary Kostakidis, the legendary SBS news presenter and journalist ongoing, and she gets her material published by Pearls and Irritations and other media, and of course widely on social media. She has written an extraordinary article covering the problems within the Australian legacy media in particular, and how that has resulted in a mass exodus of the good journalists leaving the legacy media that are beholden to that same uni party, particularly as she goes through in the terms of foreign policy debates and so forth. So people have left the field and they've gone to social media, they've gone to independent media, but of course she gave various examples of how now the independent media across the world, we've seen prominent cases in the UK, in the United States, where journalists are being dragged off planes, they're being imprisoned. And this is about to get a lot worse, she said, if these misinformation and disinformation laws are passed.
And the reason why the reason why Mary's perspective is important is because there's lots of different topics you could take up about what's misinformation, disinformation on these particular subjects. She focuses on foreign policy. She was the I think we've got a clip here of her presenting the news on SBS World News. That's where most Australians know her from, back when we only had 4 or 5 channels to watch, right? You wanted to find out what's happening in the world, you watched SBS. And so she felt a responsibility as a journalist to give Australians the right understanding of what's going on in the world. And so, because it's topical now, she singles out the issue of Israel and Palestine, because she remembers what it was like back then and how her boss, she tells the story of a boss at SBS who the Israel lobby paid to go to Israel, and he came back and he was all Israel this, Israel that, Israel the other, and there was a conflict. This is going back to the 80s, and there was another inflection point in the conflict, and Mary, and they were covering it, and Mary Kostakidis said to him, well, we should get a Palestinian voice on as well, and to present their point of view. And this boss said, what's the point of that? They're all crazy, right? And this was the bias she saw her whole career in SBS. And ABC is exactly the same. So, because when it comes to the big foreign policy questions, our media toe the line, right? And social media has become the forum where people say, well, hang on, why are we so slavishly supporting Israel? Why did we invade Iraq, right? Why are we claiming that although we were great for invading Iraq, Putin is evil for invading Ukraine? Why are we denying there was 30 years of warning about the eastward expansion of NATO, et cetera, et cetera? That's on social media. It's not on mainstream media. And they want to, the narrative that's on social media is undermining their ability to get unquestioning support or manufacture consent for their wars, so they have to rein it in. And she really gives a very good example of that. But in doing so, Elisa, she's become the target.
Yeah.
Right? So she is now the target of a racial vilification action from the Zionist Federation under 18C of the Racial Vilification Act. And they want to bankrupt her for this. And all because she shared a tweet quoting the now deceased head of Hezbollah, Nasrallah, saying that Palestine is between the river and the sea is only for Palestinians. And she had a comment on that tweet saying, Netanyahu started this, something like, I'm paraphrasing, but Netanyahu started this, and now look what it's unleashed. So it wasn't endorsing Nasrallah, it was as a journalist pointing out, well, here's Netanyahu been making all these bloodthirsty statements. Likud, his party, has in its charter that Israel alone will control from the river to the sea. That's a term they use in their charter. And so she was just making that point. The Zionist Federation have come out and they're taking her to court, backed up by big money, let me tell you. They're taking her to court over that to try and shut her down and stop her free speech in this regard. And we're going to play a clip now that was just on British Sky News 2 days ago about an event in Israel, but it's right beside Gaza, where settlers, now they're called illegal settlers. I'm calling them criminal settlers. If they're illegal, it means they're criminals. And they've been backed up by the Israeli government for decades, and by the Americans, and by the British. They know this is occupied territory. It's the Palestinians' land. They've been sending them in there to take it over. The woman in the clip you'll see in another place, I saw her bragging, they've got 330 settlements in all these occupied territories. They're good at this. And they're talking about what they want to do to Gaza, right? And the same Zionist Federation of Australia that wants to bankrupt Mary Kostakidis over what she says doesn't say a thing about this sort of thing. So just play the clip and see how blood-curdling it is.
This field, you can see Gaza on the horizon, a shattered landscape. But these people would all like to go and live there. These are the settlers in waiting, keen to start a new life, to annex Gaza for Israel. But what of the Palestinians who live in Gaza now? Most we spoke to suggested they should be expelled, but some here were even more extreme.
I just think we need to kill them, every one of them, and that's it. And if not that, because the country will not let that happen, the government. Just the least we can do is just kick them out of our land, because this is our home, this is our land, and we deserve it.
Settling Gaza was once a fringe idea, but now it's suddenly mainstream. The National Security Minister was here, telling the crowd that it was the moral and correct solution.
The truth is that this is the most moral, the most correct solution, not under force.
But this, perhaps the biggest draw, a woman who spent 50 years urging people to seize land and settle in the West Bank. She told me Gaza could be occupied even while soldiers were still fighting.
How do you imagine the war will end to let you live in Gaza?
While the war is continuing, we will fill the areas that were liberated with Jewish community.
Across the neighbouring field, a counter-protest from people who see the mere idea of settling in Gaza as repellent, inflammatory and worryingly popular.
It's no one's right and it's no one's duty, and what they're doing is illegal. What they're doing is A, illegal, B, it's going to cause incredible problems.
The people gathering here say it would be a privilege, a right, even a duty to settle in Gaza. We spoke to a couple with 3 young children who said they were excited at the prospect. But as we spoke, you could hear the thud of shelling. Gaza, which is just 2 miles in that direction, is under attack again.
Israel's focus was once again trained on Jabalia in northern Gaza. Here, people have been rounded up, men separated from women and children. Israel says it is offering them safe passage, that hundreds have already gone. But as they were leaving, more airstrikes hit this cursed town. The people of Jabalia, like so many across Gaza, feel besieged and battered. And yet, just across the border, there are others who are desperate to move in. Adam Parsons, Sky News, near the Israel-Gaza border.
That's called ethnic cleansing, Elisa, by any definition. And there was a government minister there. Ben-Gvir, the national security minister in Israel's government, was there, right? Anybody in their right mind all around the world must denounce that in vehement terms, vehement. But we have an apparatus in Australia that wants to shut anybody down for even looking twice at it. This is what we're dealing with, and this is what's been weaponised. So if they get their bill up, their mad bill, it comes down to who gets in ACMA to define the parameters as to what actually gets shut down, such that there would be people who would be saying, "Oh, you're not going to share that," right? Because that actually shows you if you were on the receiving end of that kind of attitude in Israel, would you resist, right? And that's called and you saw the young woman. And can I point out the young woman who called for an order to be killed? Can I point out what her accent was? An American accent. With an American accent, these people have been given this sense of religious entitlement. They are lunatics, and they are the driving force behind the conflict. We've always heard about the Muslim fundamentalism. We've had it drummed into us for decades and decades. While we've been focusing on the Muslim fundamentalism and the extremism of Hamas, etc., Israel has been increasingly taken over by these fanatical, extremist, bloodthirsty lunatics. And the fact they're now in the government is what's driving this conflict. And America and the British are backing it all the way. They make all these statements, we want them, but they provide the bombs at the same time that's doing all this.
Yeah, and one of the things Mary cited in the article was this quote from Double Down News, which said, in the UK and indeed the US, you can glorify genocide. You can even go and fight for the IDF, a foreign country, and you can actually commit genocide, then come back like you never left. And nothing would happen to you, but make a post on social media.
You can go to jail.
Exactly. So
in the UK, you can go to jail. And they want it here as well, but in this case, or you can get your pantsuit off you.
So I urge you to read the article. We'll put a link to that below because she really develops the case. It's a lengthy piece, but it's well worth reading through.
They're going after Mary Kostakidis because she's a big target. Like with Julian Assange, it's about making an example of people. It's like with David McBride and what they did with the whistleblower. It's about making examples of people. So follow the Mary Kostakidis story because this is going to become a big legal fight. And the Australian people need to get behind her.
But keep this, what we've talked about, in mind when you do what you're about to do, which is to go and write your email or call the Greens and tell them, don't let this bill go through. What's it going to do to you? What impacts? It's going to crush your voice on issues like Gaza.
Yeah, we'll link below to her article on Mary's article on pearls and irritation. Send that to every Green. Everybody needs to send this article because the Greens are actually, they understand some of the better than most, some of the issues with Israel and Gaza. They need to see it in those terms, unless they, so they don't make the biggest mistake of their life and just waving this damn bill through because Sarah Hanson-Young's got it in her mind that somehow this is going to, take away Elon Musk's power.
No, exactly. And circulate that article on social media. This could really be a crucial turning point to defeat this bill, which we believe can be done. We've done it before. So we'll leave it with you. That's all for the show for this week. Thanks, Robbie.
Thanks, Lisa.
Tune in next week.
Authorised by Robert Barwick, Citizens Party, Melbourne.